Hello and welcome back. I am so sorry that it has been so long since I have posted. I'm just trying to
live my life, you know?
Okay, if you're new here, my name is McKenna and I tell the stories of those who can't tell it themselves. If you enjoy learning about missing persons, true crime, or you just enjoy hanging out with me, I want to encourage you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This video will be in a podcast style again. You will no longer see my face, but you will see pictures of the people and the places that we are discussing. So feel free to listen while you work. And with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in. Today we are talking about Tex McIver and the death of his wife, Diane. Tex and Diane McIver were considered to be a high-rolling power couple. Tex and Diane had been married for 11 years but had been together for nearly 16. They met in 2000, just after Diane, the executive vice president of a real estate and advertising company, had gotten divorced and moved into an upper-class condominium in Buckhead, which is located in Atlanta, Georgia. Tex was a labor lawyer and a fellow resident at the luxury condominium. Neighbors say that the two became inseparable. They would throw parties at Tex's weekend home, which they called the ranch, and they would invite lots of wealthy, well-to-do friends, including the Putnam County Sheriff. They married after dating for 5 years, and according to friends, both Diane and Tex were equally matched when it came to personal finances, and they kept their finances separate when they wed, which makes it all the more strange that Tex shot and killed his wife 16 years after meeting her. Before Tex and Diane married, Diane wanted to build a party house of sorts at the ranch, and the ranch is where the two lived after they were married. They regularly hosted extravagant parties for very large groups of people, and while Tex didn't want to build it, he told Diane she could build the party house if she paid for it, which she did, and she later called the house the saloon. Their financial situation was pretty complex, and we'll get into that soon, but their friends made it seem as though they didn't fight over money, they just simply had different priorities. They lived at the ranch, which Tex owned, in Putnam County, Georgia, a very high-class, wealthy, and influential area. Diane's death has been considered suspicious from the get-go, and I want to hear your thoughts after this video. On the day of Diane's death, Sunday, September 25th, 2016, she and Tex, along with her longtime friend Danny Joe, spent the afternoon playing golf. On their way home, they stopped at a Longhorn Steakhouse for dinner, where Tex and Diane had a few alcoholic beverages. They believed that they had had a little too much to drink, and so Danny Joe drove the SUV home. Now, it wasn't clear if Danny Joe offered to drive or if she had been asked to drive, and this will become a little more important as you begin to understand how the rest of the evening unraveled. They are seated in the car as such. Danny Joe is in the driver's seat, Diane is in the passenger seat, and her husband Tex is in the back seat directly behind Diane. As they are heading to their condo in Buckhead, a property that Diane maintained after marriage, they hit immense traffic on the interstate. The women decide that it would be best if they merge off of the highway with the intention of getting out of bumper-to-bumper traffic. Now, in the meantime, according to Tex, he had fallen asleep but had briefly woken up as they merged off of the highway. According to Tex, he stated that he recognized that the ramp that Danny Joe used to merge off of the highway led to what he considered to be a rough part of town. So he asked his wife Diane to hand him his gun. So she handed Tex his gun, which was said to be in the center console of the vehicle. Now, they drove about another 5 to 10 minutes and they were just about to hit Piedmont Park. Tex says that he had dozed back off to sleep, what he considered to be an almost in-between state of being awake and asleep. And I think that we can all say that we've been there before, especially having been a passenger in a vehicle. But Tex says he was startled awake when the vehicle came to a sudden stop, and given the fact that the gun was still in his hands, the gun accidentally went off, shooting his wife Diane in the back. Now, as soon as the shot is fired, he asked if everybody was okay, and Danny Joe says yes, but Diane says, "I've been shot." Danny Joe stated that she intended to go to Piedmont Hospital, but Tex said no, Emory is closer. But there are 4 hospitals less than 5 miles from where the shooting took place, including both Piedmont and Emory. But Emory University, where Diane was taken, was the farthest. Grady Memorial Hospital, a level 1 trauma center, was only about 3 miles away. Now, Now, in the interview I saw with the Putnam County Sheriff, a friend of the McIvers, not involved with the case, stated that the people in the vehicle were so affluent that they would have only considered Emory University Hospital, and that Grady Memorial Hospital is for indigent people. Which, if you're not familiar with the word indigent, it means poor and needy. And I simply don't have the time in this video to begin to discuss the sense of entitlement that comes along with that statement, so let me know your thoughts below. Regardless, they take Diane to Emory University, where before rushing Diane into surgery, she stated that this was an accident and that Tex didn't mean to shoot her. An emergency room nurse later testified that Tex was emotionless in the waiting room and that he did not appear to be upset or distraught. Diane died that night in the OR at 12:49 a.m. Obviously, investigators interviewed Danny Jo that night, as she was the only other witness to the shooting. That evening, she told detectives that she had no doubt that Diane's death was simply a horrible accident. But a little over 4 months after the incident, on February 2nd, 2017, she claimed that Tex had attempted to manipulate her, telling her to lie and state that she wasn't in the vehicle at the time of the shooting. His lawyer states that if he had said this to her, it was only to protect her from being involved. But days after the shooting, Tex requested a meeting with Danny Jo, his lawyers, and 2 reporters, designed to allow Danny Jo to make a public statement that this was indeed an accident. But after she didn't show up for the meeting, Tex left a voicemail for Danny Jo's husband stating that, basically, "You have no idea the problem this is causing me. Danny Jo is sending me to prison. Call me right away and delete this message." Many experts just don't believe that the gun could have been fired accidentally. The handgun used to kill Diane can be fired in one of 2 ways: single action or double action. Either way, the gun only fires if the trigger is pulled. In single action, the shooter pulls back the hammer, which means it only takes about 2 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger. In double action, it takes 12 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger, which means either Tex accidentally fired the gun using 12 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger, or he was sitting with the gun already cocked, which would be foolish for somebody who is so familiar with firearms. He owned rifles, handguns, and AR-15s, so he was no stranger to weapons. But still to this day, Tex cannot or will not answer whether the gun was fired in single or double action. 4 days after the shooting, he announced to the public through a spokesperson that the reason he had the gun in his hand to begin with was because he was worried about homeless people, carjackers, or Black Lives Matters protesters, and this only deteriorated the public's view of Tex in that it gave him an air of white wealth and privilege. Still yet, the case against Tex grew stronger, as just after 2 months following Diane's death, Tex began selling off Diane's belongings, including belts, furs, hats, and jewelry. Bruce Harvey is now Tex McIver's legal representative, who says that the case was mismanaged from the beginning. He made it clear that the money derived from the sale of Diane's belongings went directly to her estate, which funded the many gifts she left to family and friends in her will, and that none of the profit went to Tex himself. On December 20th, 2016, the Atlanta Police Department determined that the shooting was not intentional, so the Fulton County District Attorney's Office charged Tex with involuntary manslaughter and reckless conduct. And while this was good news for Tex, as he was able to bond out of jail, the District Attorney's Office began its own investigation into the shooting of Diane McIver. And just 1 week after Tex was charged, an Atlanta CBS exclusive released information that suggested that Tex owed his wife $350,000 at the time of her death. He was expected to pay this money back to her with interest by December 14th, 2014, and obviously it was now 2016, so this never happened. Tex claimed that this money was her portion of the party building that we discussed before, the saloon. He claimed that for tax reasons, they made it appear to be a loan, and that there was never any expectation for him to pay this money back to Diane. Now, I'm not wealthy enough to understand the legality behind this, but those were his claims, and they may indeed have some merit. But the documentation, for legal reasons, gave motive to the prosecution. Now, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office had reason to believe that Diane may have had a second will, so they searched the couple's property in Buckhead, and believe it or not, this search led them to discover that Tex was violating his bond because he was in possession of, Yes, a firearm. He claimed that the pistol, which at one time belonged to his wife, was planted there because the condo had been searched prior with no discovery of a weapon, but the judge did not believe this claim and his bond was revoked and he was put back in prison. The very next day, a grand jury determined that there was enough evidence to charge Tex with the murder of Diane McIver. Now, this means that the jury felt that there was enough evidence to suggest that Tex had intentionally killed his wife. At this time, his new attorney, Bruce Harvey, got him released on house arrest. The prosecution relied on the argument that Tex McIver murdered his wife over money, while the defense maintained that he was financially worse off without Diane. The prosecution argued that his firm had cut his monthly income by nearly half, and that before they were married, Tex borrowed nearly $750,000 from Diane. As payment, he ended up deeding her half of the ranch, meaning he was no longer the only owner of the home he had worked so hard for. In 2011, he had borrowed another $350,000, but this time, Diane required him to sign a promissory note that gave her the right to foreclose on the ranch at any time if he didn't pay her back. They argued that by murdering Diane, he regained full ownership of the ranch. Now, the defense argued that he was not in dire financial strains and that he had a net worth of $1.7 million. They claimed the shooting was a mere accident. After all, even Diane said it. They stated that Tex had a diagnosed sleep disorder that prevented him from arousing from sleep quickly, and this was accompanied by amnesia. Additionally, the defense said that it was Diane's idea to take the exit off of the highway to begin with, so how could Tex have premeditated this murder? Testimony lasted for 20 days. After 4 days of deliberation, the jury was deadlocked, but the judge asked them to continue deliberations. And 2 hours later, Tex McIver was found guilty of felony murder, which means the jury believed he had not killed Diane with malice of forethought, but that he had intended to do bodily harm. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this because that conviction is strange given the circumstances and given the argument that the prosecution put forward. Tex McIver was sentenced to life in prison. Now, it is without a doubt that the defense will file appeals. In fact, in May of this year, he appeared in the Georgia Court of Appeals in an attempt to dismiss a wrongful death lawsuit brought by Diane's estate. So we will have to see what comes of that. Now, I have so much to say about this case, but I would love to engage with you in the comments. So please share with me your thoughts. Do you believe Tex is guilty? Was this an accident? One thing that just drives me crazy that I have not heard much about is that if he felt he was too inebriated to drive, then why did he feel he was sober enough to handle a firearm? Please shout out your opinions down below. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.